Amy Jill Levine, a New Testament scholar, says that the parables are meant to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. We might also say the parables are meant to afflict those of us who want to make sense of them. Although we tend to read the parables as if they're straightforward and simple, Jesus' short stories are actually profoundly complex. His parables aren't analogies. They certainly aren't narrative vehicles for Christian theology. Remember, Jesus was Jewish. They are, in the words of one scholar, vivid and strange and intended to tease the mind into active thought. If immediately after Jesus told a story, you responded that you knew exactly what he meant, he would have told you to think again. And so it is with today's gospel reading, the parable of the widow and the unjust judge. When we hear the word widow, our minds might think of the biblical admonition to take care of orphans and widows. If so, then we might instinctively cast the widow of our parable as weak and needy and maybe even tender. And then, because a story with a good guy needs a bad guy, we might turn our anger on the other two characters, the judge and the widow's adversary. Once we've figured out the roles, then it's just a short hop, skip, and a jump to the meaning that God wants us to execute justice on behalf of vulnerable people who can't speak for themselves. But the widow does speak for herself, so much, in fact, that the judge eventually gives her what she wants. And what is that? Justice? Not so fast, Levine cautions. The Greek text is clear. She wants vengeance. And for what reason? Now, we assume her opponent did her wrong, but we can't be sure. Maybe she just got into a spat with a neighbor and wants the judge to punish him. But aren't we now slandering a sweet little old helpless lady? We might be slandering her by imagining her to be helpless. While God commands us in the Bible to look after widows, we're never commanded to paint them as one-dimensional characters. If a judge can be unjust, then so can a widow. If a man can abuse his power, then so can a woman. The Gospels are full of strong women, and this particular widow might be one of the strongest. In fact, Levine translates verse 5 as, "I will avenge her so that she does not give me a black eye." The widow is not asking for vengeance, she's demanding it. So how can we begin to make sense of Jesus' provocative story? First, let's let it be provocative. We don't have to sanitize it or Sunday schoolize it. We don't need good characters and bad characters. Jesus' stories are full of people who are just like us, complicated, messy folks who sometimes do the wrong thing. Second, if we're willing to reconsider the widow's motives, then we ought to reconsider whether we want to hold her up as a model. Do we really want to demand vengeance on our enemies? Shouldn't we love them as Jesus teaches? Shouldn't we wish them well? Now, maybe we don't make demands of judges to their faces like our widow friend, but we vote for and publicly debate policies of vengeance. When we fight for lengthy prison sentences and the death penalty, are we standing in solidarity with the vengeful widow? But then, who will stand in solidarity with the accused? Remember, we haven't gotten to hear his side of the story. That's another lesson here. Don't rush to judgment. In fact, if there is someone worth imitating in this story, maybe it's the judge. He doesn't want to dole out vengeance. Wouldn't it be funny if the good guy of Jesus' story ends up being the person who doesn't fear God? Luke offers his own interpretation of Jesus' parable, that whereas the judge is slow to avenge those who ask him, God will do it more quickly. But I guess the question is, do we really want God to take vengeance on our opponents? Or do we want him to take his time, like the judge? What if, at the very moment we're praying for God to swiftly depose our enemies are praying the same thing. If they get what they want, then what will happen to us? Like all of Jesus' parables, this one invites us not only to reconsider the motives of Jesus' characters, but our own motives.